Hi, I'm Matt Carmichael, the editor of Livability.com. We are here today with Richard Florida, the author of the best-selling Rise of the Creative Class, or a senior editor of The Atlantic, and the director of the Martin Prosperity Institute, who worked with us to create our new Livability 100 Index. Richard, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Matt. Thank you. Thank you for working with us. It's been a great pleasure.
So I want to talk a little about how, over time, the idea of livability has changed.
Well, it goes back to when I was writing Rise of the Creative Class, and I was living in Pittsburgh at the time, and people were talking about, they didn't really use the word livability, they just called it quality of life. And quality of life was safe streets, good schools, affordable suburban housing. And that's great. I mean, that's phenomenal, but it was about kind of the traditional nuclear leave it to beaver family. And I started to look around, and this was, back in around the year 2000, 50% of our people were not married. They were single in some shape or form. 25% of us were living in a conventional nuclear family. So I wanted to expand the notion of livability or quality of life to include more groups. And that led me to think about, well, it's not just a suburban way of life. For many Americans, a traditional suburban way of life is great, especially if you have kids and you want more space. But for many other Americans, there were alternatives, urban living, a walkable suburb. Some people want to live in a rural area. So I tried to expand that notion of livability or quality of life. And I actually played a little word game, as you know. I kind of turned the idea of quality of life into quality of place. And for me, quality of place means, a great place to be, great schools, safe streets, good jobs, high-paying jobs, but also a place that protects its natural environment, that has green space, that has clean water. That's one of the things we found in our big Gallup survey. People want to be in a green community that has abundant arts and cultural offerings, and not just high arts, street-level arts, a place that has authenticity. One of the big things we found, a place that preserves its history. It's really important to take care of, and all those things add up to livability.
One thing we found in a lot of the top 10 cities is that they had a pretty dominant cultural institution, be that a hospital or a university, places like Rochester, Minnesota. Can you talk a little about how those institutions can take, especially a small to mid-sized city, from being a good place to live to a great place to live?
Kevin Stolaric and I, who work together at the Martin Prosperity Institute, we call them kind of the core, the hub institutions, the creative anchors, the knowledge economy anchors. And so we're finding, that they both generate new technology, generate new ideas, but they attract talent, not only faculty or researchers or doctors or engineers, they attract people like around a great university or great cultural institution. You get kind of a 24/7 community. Mm-hmm. People are on the street, they're going to cafes, they're getting involved in work. So I think that's one of the reasons that we find these new creative hubs, if you will, tend to be these nonprofit, university-based. And what we're finding is, obviously big cities do pretty well. They have size and scale. But the small communities, mid-sized communities are doing better, tend to be, not exclusively, there are other ways to do it, tend to have these great anchor creative institutions.
This was some of the first work the Martin Prosperity did at the kind of city level, not the metro level or state level. Were there some surprises you saw kind of at the top of the list?
The real new area that we need to pay attention to is within the metro. The community level, the core city, the suburban areas, and how they fit together, and both on the upside, which are the good ones, and the bad side, how is inequality in our society? Some suburbs up, some poverty in suburbs is now more than in cities. Some parts of our cities reviving, some parts of our cities dying. How do we understand kind of concentrated advantage and concentrated disadvantage? Some of the places on the list, the Boulder, Colorado, had risen already up through the ranks as a metro, not as a city, as a great knowledge economy center. But a place like Miami Beach, where I spend time too in the winter, but where in the past was seen as a vacation or retirement spot, that's beginning to pay attention, and I guess it's paying off because they come up. Arts and culture, Art Basel, satellite fairs, food and wine programming, and kind of changing from a kind of bling bling club scene, if you will, nightlife, to more of a culturally enriched place. And when I think about livability, it's really interesting that you say this and use the construct. In the old days, it was about what the place gives me materially. It gives me a big house, it gives me a big driveway, it gives me a big, place to put my cars, it gives me good roads. Now it's what can a place cause me to experience? I mean, I'm making an anchor, but and one of the things about a place like Miami Beach, increasingly, and Boulder, the places on the list, Rochester, Minnesota, it becomes a community of experiences.